Okay, and we are live. Welcome in, everybody, to the Huddle Up Podcast live edition, of course, presented as always by Mile High Huddle, powered by Overtime Media. I'm your host, Chad Jensen, and with me, as always, my partner in crime, who you know and who you love, Zack Kelberman. Zack, we finally got confirmation of something that we all basically expected was going to happen. Kind of got that vibe toward the end of the season. The LA Chargers have finally realized that they butted up against their ceiling. They've gone as far as they can possibly go with Phillip Rivers, and according to Fox Sports' Jay Glazer, he's not returning. So he's going to hit the open market. He already moved his family back east, Florida, I think it was, or was it Carolina?
Florida,
Florida. So your reaction, and also the idea, from what I'm hearing and the buzz, is that they're in on Justin Herbert. They like the Oregon quarterback. So what would your thoughts be, first of all, on Phillip Rivers saying goodbye to the AFC West? Maybe for now anyway, and then Justin Herbert coming in to do battle with Drew Lock.
You know, everything comes to an end, Chad, and Phillip Rivers, he gave it a good run in San Diego and Los Angeles. He was a really, really good, but not necessarily great quarterback and never won anything, but his time has come there, and I understand the organization's decision to want to move on. They have Tyrod Taylor. If they draft Justin Herbert, that would be a great setup there for the future and the present. And for Phillip Rivers, he's going to Florida, and what Florida team could use a quarterback? You have the Dolphins and you have the Bucs. The Bucs could probably move on from Jameis Winston. So there's going to be opportunity out there. I expect him to be playing in 2020, but not for the Chargers, and that's good for the rest of the AFC West. He's been a thorn kind of in the Broncos side, and it's ushering a new change now. Drew Lock, Patrick Mahomes, maybe Justin Herbert. That's an exciting, future in that division.
Dude, I'd honestly be intrigued to see Phillip Rivers teamed up with Bruce Arians in Tampa. He's out of the AFC. Go let him make some noise, or see if he can make some noise anyway in the NFC South. But that would be an interesting combination because, Broncos fans are well aware that he's a guy that sometimes he's pushing the ball down the field. He's pushing the ball. And sometimes he just makes that boneheaded throw. And you're like, where did that come from? Thanks for the win, sucker. Right. Like, especially in the clutch, at least against the Broncos, he just had a penchant for making boneheaded decisions, trying to push the ball that would result in a strip sack or a turnover or pick or whatever. So I'd be interesting to see him working with Bruce Arians, who's all about that vertical game. And, he's got a couple built-in, ready-to-go wide receivers there.
Great ones.
I think that would be a good fit.
If there's any coach that I think would love working with Phillip Rivers, it is Bruce Arians, one of the most pass-happy coaches in the NFL. It would fit his lifestyle, that kind of environment in Florida. I could definitely see that, Chad. I thought it was maybe the Colts for Phillip Rivers or some other team, but the Bucs right now, if they move on from Jameis, which I think they will, that's a great, easy, natural fit for Phillip Rivers.
Yeah. Yeah, we must bid adieu to Phillip Rivers, who – he had a couple of good seasons in that final 5 years with the Chargers, but it was kind of downhill for the Chargers ever since they left San Diego, with the exception of 2018, where they won whatever it was, 12 games, and they looked like they could be a contender, but of course fell apart in the playoffs. Is Phillip Rivers, like, if he retired after this season, he just said, you know what, I don't want to keep doing this. I don't want to have to go try and fit in with a new squad. He's been in the league since, 2004. He was part of that 2004 draft class with Eli and Big Ben. Do you think he has a case for the Hall of Fame? Knowing, by the way, Dan Fouts is in the Hall of Fame, and he basically, outside of, basically being one of the first quarterbacks to really consistently pioneer the 4,000-yard passing season, Eric Coryell in San Diego and all that, he doesn't really have much more of a claim to fame, yet he's in the Hall.
I don't see it at all. He never won a Super Bowl. I mean, his playoff record is 3-4, I believe. So he's definitely not, a playoff phenomenon. He's in the Hall of Very Good quarterbacks, Chad. He's not in the Hall of Fame. He's a good player for a long time, but he never got over that hump for whatever reason. You mentioned yourself his penchant for boneheaded plays, his turnovers. Good, not all-time great quarterback. He's not a Hall of Famer, in my opinion.
I just want to check out his stats real quick, his all-time career stats. See where he's at, whether he's pushing into the top 20 here. I just want to take a quick peek, and then we'll move on here. 59,000 passing yards. Dang. I remember when Elway was a player, if I'm not mistaken, he was the first quarterback to surpass 50,000 career passing yards, if I'm not mistaken. If he wasn't the first, he was one of the first. And now it's like, you play 10 years in the league, you're basically right there, as far as NFL modern passing game. But he's got 59,000. This is Phillip Rivers, 59,271 passing yards, 397 passing touchdowns to 198 interceptions. His overall record as a starter, 123 wins to 101 losses. And you want to know something that's interesting, talking about also that 2004 class of quarterbacks, the first rounders anyway. Eli, of course, just hung up his cleats. His career record, Zach, he's 117 and 117. He's 500 as a quarterback starting in the NFL with 2 rings.
That's exactly why he'll be a Hall of Famer, though. Those 2 Super Bowls, you can argue that it was the defense. You can argue it was David Tyree and Mario Manningham, but that's why Eli will be a Hall of Famer. And Rivers, I think I bungled his playoff record. It's actually 5-6, but still, he never won anything. He never was a success in the playoffs. Not a Hall of Fame quarterback, in my opinion. Very good quarterback, not Canton bound, in my opinion.
I could be probably persuaded on it. My whole thinking on it, and then we're going to turn the page. It's just simply that if you're going to let Dan Fouts into the Hall of Fame as a Chargers quarterback, Phillip Rivers' numbers dwarfs Dan Fouts. Now, I get it's a different era, right? Basically, Fouts was Namath kind of got there first, but then you had Fouts, then he kind of pioneered the air attack. Dan Marino hit the ground running in 83 and made it to the Super Bowl in 84. And then, so I get that he was kind of a pioneer, and that's what maybe gives him more of a claim to fame for the Hall. But I mean, his numbers pale compared to Phillip Rivers. But guys, this is not a Phillip Rivers podcast. As you know, this is a Denver Broncos podcast, and we have a few topics here we want to get into today. And then, of course, we look forward to hearing what's on your mind, answer a few questions, see what's up with you guys. Quick hello to those of you who've been hanging out in the room, especially Stu McPeak, Buana Beast, Mark Langley. What's up, you guys? It's good to see you. Couple of quick matters of business. As you know, guys, make sure you're following the show on Twitter. It's simply the best way to stay plugged in. Keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with the show in real time. And then don't forget, head on over to Apple Podcasts when you get some time. Leave us a creative review. And if you like what Zach and I are doing, a 5-star rating. It's a great organic way to support the show. And it also enters you into our monthly drawing. We give away a hat. We give away a shirt to a couple of randomly selected names who reviewed the podcast on Apple Podcasts. And we will announce January's winners first of next week. Yeah, first of next week, because we'll still be, our last pods this week will still barely be in January. So it'll be first of next week. We'll announce that. So take care of that business. All right, Zach, before we see what's on the minds of our awesome listeners and viewers in real time, I wanted to get your thoughts on a couple of storylines that emerged from the Pro Bowl as it relates to the Denver Broncos. Now, of course, only 2 Pro Bowlers this year. One was a shoe-in in terms of the voting, Von Miller, even though you can argue it wasn't a Pro Bowl caliber year. He was a shoe-in first-team Pro Bowler. And then, of course, Courtland Sutton got in as an alternate after DeAndre Hopkins bowed out due to injury. So 2 Broncos down in Orlando having fun. Von's showing basically, taking him under his wing. Courtland Sutton showing him how to do it and how to have fun and just settling into the whole Pro Bowl experience. What was interesting, though, was you kind of got to understand how much Courtland Sutton's profile in the NFL has risen, and not just by virtue of his Pro Bowl nod, but literally by virtue of his production in 2019. And there was a quote from Joe Hayden, who's, of course, a Pro Bowl cornerback for the Pittsburgh Steelers, that I thought was interesting. I wanted to get your take on this. He said, quote, and this has been the number 1 story on milehighhuddle.com today all day long. This is what Hayden said about Courtland Sutton. Quote, he kind of reminds me of A.J. Green. They're kind of very similar in size and build. He can go deep, he can jump, and catch the ball in the red zone. I think he's a very, very special player. Close quote. Your thoughts, Zach?
First of all, I'm so happy that he's getting the recognition around the NFL, Chad, that he deserves. And to be compared to A.J. Green, who was one of the best receivers of this generation, is such a good look, not just for Courtland Sutton, but also for the Broncos. Second of all, I believe his ceiling is even higher than A.J. Green. I believe he can be a better receiver than A.J. Green, but he's definitely built in that same type of mold. And he caught a touchdown pass yesterday, I believe, Courtland Sutton. So I didn't see 1 minute of the Pro Bowl. I might be wrong on that, but I believe
he did have 4 catches, but I don't think one of them was for a touchdown.
Okay,
I had to look up the stats for that article today for whatever reason.
Even so, I mean, he showed out well in the Pro Bowl among his fellow All-Stars in that game, and he's going to be, that's his first of many trips. I said it before, and I'll say it again, to the Pro Bowl. I mean, he's going to be there on his own recognition and volition next season.
Yeah. I mean, the biggest takeaway for me, and I wrote this in the article, is, It wasn't my article. I'm sorry. This was said in Keith's article. Keith Cummings is the one who had the article today. But he's just no longer flying under the radar. Like,
Right.
even though he was a second-round pick, he was the 40th overall selection in 2018. You know, he came in, started off as a rookie as the number 3 guy behind DT and Sanders, and then eventually became the starter. However, this year he really just blew the doors down in the Pro Bowl. You know, he's rubbing shoulders with all the stars of the league. Not only, even if they didn't come across his tape or didn't have to game plan against him and break him down last year in a game head to head, getting to see him up close in practice and, you know, rubbing shoulders with him, he's no longer flying under the radar. And that's exciting. And it's also a little bit intimidating, which just means he's, as a wideout, has to keep his nose to the grindstone, Zach. He has to keep pushing the envelope. And based on what we've seen, though, through his first 2 years, I'm not worried that he's not going to do that.
But look what he's done it with, Chad. His quarterbacks, Case Keenum, Joe Flacco, Brandon Allen, and Drew Lock as a rookie. And then he's had really, except for Emmanuel Sanders next to him, not a stable, up-and-coming, flashy, speed-demon wide receiver, too. You get him Drew Lock for a full season. You get a Jerry Jeudy, a CeeDee Lamb, or a Henry Ruggs opposite him. He's going to have a monster season next year. And I believe not only will he be a Pro Bowler, but also a first-team All-Pro. He has that perennial upside. He is that good of a player. And it's been a pleasure watching him develop the last couple seasons.
Yeah, that's the thing that's so remarkable, and what pissed me off so badly about him getting snubbed as a shoe-in Pro Bowler is that he had over 1,100 yards receiving and over 70 receptions from a pretty, you know, it's basically a quarterback carousel. Joe Flacco, basically, you know, a severely diminished version of Joe Flacco. Brandon Allen, who was just, you know, count yourself lucky you're Brandon Allen starting a game in the NFL because the stars aligned perfectly on the right team in the right moment to start. And then Drew Lock, of course, really helped him beef up the numbers down the stretch. But still, you got to tip your cap to Courtland Sutton. It's really exciting to see what the future holds for him.
It is, for sure. And I think we only see just the tip of the iceberg right now with Courtland Sutton. Like I said, you put him in the right scheme with the right pieces around him, he's going to be a very, very good player. And it just pisses me off, Chad, that someone like Jarvis Landry, who had worse stats than Courtland Sutton, made it, but Sutton didn't make it. It's all that Broncos bias and just the fact that he had, Baker Mayfield throwing to him and not, you know, anybody else. I don't like that. And I just think he'll make up for it next year, Sutton, with his own Pro Bowl recognition.
So while we've been talking, I did a quick little research on Google, and it turns out that the first to surpass 50,000 yards passing as a quarterback was, in fact, Dan Marino. And it's an extremely short list. Or wait, am I misreading this? Hold on. This is 5,000 yards. Google's not seeing the comma there and the extra zero. Let me see. Well, we can research it when we're not live and bogging down the conversation. Any of you that have a chance to hop on the Google machine, hit it and see if you can find out whether I was wrong on that. And in fact, maybe it was Marino, which would make sense that he would hit it sooner than Elway, because, you know, he was putting up bigger passing yards and played not quite as long as Elway. Or did he? Well, we'll see. Anyway, I want to turn the page. If you guys can find that, hit me up in the comment stream. We'll check it out, and I'll stand corrected. The other aspect of this Pro Bowl, Zach, I wanted to get your take on, is something that Von Miller said about Drew Lock. And let me pull this up here. All right. So, of course, any Denver Bronco at this point, when they get put in front of the media and a microphone's in their face, it's only a short matter of time before the obligatory Drew Lock question comes. And in the case of Von Miller, when he was asked about Drew Lock by the Associated Press down there in Orlando, he lit up like a Christmas tree. And here's what he said, quote, "I thought he was going to be good without a new offensive coordinator." In other words, without the Broncos having to hire someone like Pat Shurmur. And now they're bringing in all these guys to help him be successful. The sky's the limit for him. And then he was asked about what made Lock special, or what he views as, you know, the reason why Lock is special. Quote, "Whenever you have a confident quarterback out there balling and doing all the great stuff he does, everybody feeds off that. It gets everyone excited." Close quote. There's a few takeaways from these remarks, Zach, but I like that he says basically that Lock is doing great stuff, and the fact that everyone's feeding off of that and everyone's excited. And you could see how the Denver Broncos down the stretch, even though they knew they were out of the playoffs, Zach, all of a sudden they started playing with way more swag. They started playing with a lot more loose, right? And with a lot more confidence. And it's kind of weird because a lot of times you you think if you're geared up and you're hyped up, sometimes people get a little tight when the stakes are high, but the Broncos found a way to stay loose and stay confident at the same time. And you can attribute that to Drew Lock kind of having a palpable change on the entire roster.
Yeah, that was definitely interesting. And though I will take everything Vaughn says with a grain of salt, because he said it about, Paxton Lynch, he said it about Case Keenum, this one does feel different. This kind of praise feels genuine and authentic. And what was telling to me from those remarks was he didn't think the Broncos would change coordinators. So obviously in the locker room, which Vaughn has a great pulse of, they didn't really see apparently the rift between Scangarello and Vic Fangio. It wasn't that evident. So maybe it was a spur of the moment, impulsive decision. But if Vaughn didn't notice it and he was actually caught off guard by the Broncos changing coordinators, then it couldn't have been that public. It had to have been something behind the scenes. So from what he told me or what he said, actually that jumped out to me about the coordinators and the coaching staff.
Right. And guys, before you get, too upset that Vaughn, try and minimize what he's saying about Drew Lock. Listen, he did say this was Vaughn. This was reported by Cameron Wolfe, who at the time worked for the Denver Post back in May of 2016. Vaughn said, quote, Paxton, he looks like a superstar to me. Now, keep in mind, this was before they had even gotten on the field together, basically. Okay, so that's where when Zach says Von Miller gushed about Paxton Lynch, gushed about Case Keenum, that's what he's talking about. But it's a different context. This is Von Miller talking about a young quarterback now, after having played with him basically and been around him for a full season. Even though he didn't start for a whole season, Miller was around him for a whole year. And with Case Keenum, as a leader of the team, Von Miller, you expect him to get out in front and from a public relations perspective, shower praise at Case Keenum. But as Zach said, this time it does feel different. And one of the reasons why it feels different is because it looked different, right? Zach, it came out different in the wash in terms of how he was able to impact the team.
He's backing up Vaughn's praise, whereas Keenum didn't do it and Paxton Lynch didn't do it. Locke went out there, went 4-1, had 2 major upsets, and he is established as the leader of this franchise. And Vaughn was that poster boy. Vaughn was the face of the franchise. He was getting paid like a franchise quarterback. So now someone comes in, and I think he's happy almost to share the spotlight, Chad. He's happy to not have that pressure on him to be the guy and to have his offensive counterpart. So yeah, while he said those comments in the past, like I touched on, this one feels genuine. This one feels more authentic, and I think it's a sign of things to come based on the way Locke, a first-year player, has the pulse of the locker room and the veterans in that locker room already.
All right, guys, we took this 17 minutes into the show. Let's start seeing what's on your guys' mind. Spicy Mike, by the way, doing some research. Maybe you didn't. Maybe you already knew this. He's saying Marino did it in 96, Elway in 98. And when you think about it, that makes sense because Marino's passing numbers were always significantly more prolific than Elway's were from the drop. Elway took all 16 years basically, to get over the hump. So I'd be curious though, Spicy Mike, if you want to check it out, if at the time that was the first 1 and 2. So right, if I'm not mistaken, so if Marino was first in 96, no one else had done it before that point. Elway was number 2. Stu jumps in with a $10 donation on Super Chat. We love you, Stu. Man. So consistent. We appreciate you. Let's see here. Kathleen, in 2000, Dan Marino retired from the Miami Dolphins after 17 years of play. Elway retired in 99. So I was wrong with that, with 16 years playing. You got to feel bad for Marino, not quite getting over the hump. Played in 1 Super Bowl and who was it? Did they lose to the Niners? Was it the Niners? You guys correct me if I'm wrong on that, but Dan Marino changed the game as a quarterback with the aerial attack. Mark Langley jumps in, $5 donation on Super Chat. Appreciate you, Mark. He says, what up, my guys? How much money will Denver have in cap space? And now you guys can flex the football priest shirts. Hashtag Chad Gangsta. Hashtag Zach Perna. Hashtag Broncos. The Zach Perna thing cracks me up. Let's see. How much will they have? All right, so it's like 61 million right now, just shy of 62. And then if you let me pull up Denver Broncos salary cap real quick.
Once they cut the Todd Davises and the Jeff Hiremans of the world and Flacco potentially, they can have $20 more million in cap space. So Broncos are fine.
Dang near, yeah. Just Joe Flacco alone, they can save over $10 million on the cap. Then if they don't pick up the option on Ron Leary's contract, that's another $8.5 million. So now you got 18. Todd Davis would give you another 5. Hireman another 4.
It's a lot of money.
So yeah, they're sitting right now at just shy of 62 million, Zach.
That's a lot right now before any other moves, Chad. They can bring in a couple marquee free agents and still take care of their own. But with 80 million, 85 million, they can do whatever they want. And that's why I expect them to lock down the Simmons, maybe Derek Wolfe, Chris Harris Jr., Shelby Harris, not all of them, but a few of them, and also venture out of house for at least one marquee free agent if they so choose. Maybe a Chris Jones. We'll have to wait and see. But the Broncos financially, Chad, for once, are sitting very pretty.
Yeah, I expect them to be extremely active initially, re-signing their own guys. In fact, according to, I'm trying to remember where it came from now, Zach, off the top of my head. Maybe it was something Kliss grabbed, maybe it was a radio appearance. But the first thing the Broncos are going to do when they all get back from this vacation they've been on, Terry, we see you. We'll grab you just one sec, bro. Is they're going to take a hard look at making a decision on who they're going to make a true effort to re-sign of their own guys. And then once they have that business taken care of, say, okay, now what do we have available? Let's define what our priorities are in free agency and then be ready to attack it in March. And that kind of brings up something Glenn's asking us here. He says, in one of Eric Trickle's pieces, he does a few of these each and every offseason. It's a full offseason mock. And if you guys haven't checked it out, you got to go read it. It's a lot of fun. It's, re-signings, roster cuts as far as what you do with the current roster, free agent signings, and then a full 7-round mock draft. And Glenn's right. In Eric's initial first offseason mock of the 2020 offseason, he had the Denver Broncos letting every one of their free agents walk with the exception of Justin Simmons. So he says, it was an interesting theory. What do you guys think of keeping only one guy? Personally, I mean, if you boil it down, Simmons is the most likely guy that, is going to be re-signed. So that's a no-brainer. But the idea of the Broncos letting everybody else walk, I think that you're probably going to see Derek Wolfe come back, either him or Shelby Harris. My bet is it's going to be Derek Wolfe. And I still think there's an outside chance. I'm not telling you to bet on it, but I still think, Zach, there's an outside chance they can get Chris Harris Jr. re-signed, depending on what the market really shows for him. He wants to hit the market, and he's going to. He's not going to accept it unless they just blow down the doors with a massive offer between now and free agency, which I don't think they're going to do. They're going to let him, and he's going to want to test the market, depending on what that market is. Like if you got Philadelphia coming hot, Zach, with like $16 million a year, right, the Broncos are going to let him walk.
Yeah, I could see the Broncos just re-signing Simmons. I can see that situation playing out in reality, but I think, like Chad said, they're going to re-sign either Shelby Harris or Derek Wolfe. It's up to you guys to determine what you think should come back. I think Chad and I are split on that, but I think one of them will. Justin Simmons, no-brainer, even via long-term contract or the franchise tag. You never know. The Connor McGoverns of the world, they could bring back a Will Parks. A lot of free agents they have out there. I think they'll re-sign Simmons. He's priority number one. Then you can bring back some of the lower-level guys. But the Devontae Bookers of the world, the Theo Riddicks are all gone. So I agree with Eric's premise that among their many free agents, they're not going to re-sign a lot of them. But the key guys, they will work to get under contract before venturing out of house.
Terry jumps in with a $10 donation on Super Chat.
Thank you, Terry.
Appreciate you, Terry. Should Locke use virtual reality to study Shermer's offensive scheme and defensive sets? Love the show. Keep up the great job, Chad and Zach. Thank you,
appreciate
Terry.
it.
That means a lot. I mean, yeah, I think Drew Lock became a believer in VR through the program. It really helped him down the developmental curve as a rookie. Like, you've heard me talk about how impressed I was, how quickly he was able to hit the ground running as a rookie after spending 10 weeks on injured reserve. But let's rewind and remember what he was doing while he was on injured reserve. He wasn't just sitting on his hands. He was actually going through each and every practice. So whoever the starter was, Joe Flacco and then Brandon Allen, during practice, in their helmet, they would wear this particular camera that would interface with the VR program, right? And so the coaches would run through the practice. Drew Lock would watch that in person from the sideline, just observing. And then he would go at the after practice and go through it once. And then so he would go through the entire practice from Joe Flacco or Brandon Allen's perspective in the VR. And then the next morning he would wake up, and before practice, he would go through yesterday's practice one more time through the VR. So I think absolutely and it'll be interesting to see if Shermer's able to bring any content with him from like Giants practices that Locke can, jump into right away. But my bet is they're going to have to put some tape on practice first so that then he can use that for VR, Zach.
There's no downside to it, Chad, as long as he doesn't lean on that for his development. It's like having a rear view camera in your car. You can use it to help you, but it's not the thing you should rely on. You still have to look behind you and make sure no one else is coming. He has to still get on the field and practice and go through the physical reps along with the virtual reality. But he's already well versed with that. Elway and Locke are both on record as saying it helped him in his first year. So if they can bring Shermer's offense to that type of, like you said, content, it can't hurt. It cannot do him any worse. But he's going to get better solely by playing and doing, not by sitting and watching.
Joseph says from YouTube, how does everyone feel about the Broncos being the third youngest team in the league? I would like to see this team stick together and grow into a success. I think that's got to be one of the things that should excite fans at this stage, is that the Broncos improved over their win total from the previous year by 1. They went 7-9 and finished the season 4-1. And it was basically the young core doing almost all the heavy lifting. And that was without Bradley Chubb for 3/4 of the season.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's the best teams have a good mix of young and old, but the Broncos have been just old the last couple of years. They haven't had a lot of young nucleus pieces like they do now. You look on offense alone, and that just is all young players. So it's definitely encouraging. And that's why when they sprinkle in on the defense in the drafts this offseason, they will have a complete team. So it's definitely exciting times in Denver. We've seen the Broncos being an old, representative of what Flacco was. Just an old man, couldn't move, was very inflexible. Now they're very young and spry, so it's good to see.
Wayne says, was Kubiak on Facebook, was Kubiak ever considered for the offensive coordinator? And which system fits Locke better, Kubes or Shermer? Well, of course, as everybody should know, Kubiak was considered for the initial offensive coordinator position when Fangio was hired. This last time, no, he absolutely was not. As far as which, and by the way, if you guys missed it, he was I guess you could call it a promotion. I mean, his previous job, I can't even remember what the title was, but he was the offensive coordinator basically in Minnesota. Kevin Stefanski, is it Stefanski? How you pronounce that? Anyway, he was by title the offensive coordinator, but now Kubiak is, with him taking the Cleveland head job. Gary is taking the OC over. Anyway, it's in Minnesota. So as far as which Locke fits better, the Kube or the Shermer, honestly, I think Locke's skill set based on the spread and his experience playing in a little bit more, 11 personnel where it's 3 wide receivers out on the field, a single tight end, and spreading the field a little bit more fits, which is what Shermer, his passing concepts, even though it's all West Coast, his passing schemes and philosophies are more spread oriented. Whereas with Kubiak, it's a lot more play action heavy. It's a lot more 2 tight end sets. It's a lot more 2 running back sets where you're bringing in the formation. You're basically condensing the field, and then you're using play fakes in the running game to create separation. And it's just a different animal. And I think with Drew Lock's arm talent, Zach, also considering the fact that Shermer's game is a little bit more vertical, I think it's probably a Shermer off the top of my head without doing a ton of study on it.
Yeah, Kubiak's offense fits someone like Case Keenum better for the reasons that you mentioned, Chad. But for someone like Drew Lock, who loves to air the ball out, a vertical attack, that's what Shermer brings to the table. That's why the Broncos hired Shermer to begin with. And not only that, his noted quarterback development history, which we touched on yesterday. So no-brainer, I would put Drew Lock in a Shermer offense before I put him in a Kubiak offense.
All right, let's see what else we got here from Josh jumping in. Also super consistent. By the way, Josh, sometimes I get it confused, but if we haven't reached out to you, you should hit us up, milehighhuddle@gmail.com, and let's see about getting you a shirt, man, because you've been so consistent with your support of the show.
Appreciate it.
We appreciate you, bro. He says, I think the Broncos should trade up into the back of the second round because we need will be flying off the board. I'm not sure what he's saying there. What do you think? We have 3 third-round picks. So the idea, though, Zach, what Josh is saying, I think the Broncos should trade up into the back of the second round because I'm not sure exactly what he's actually saying there. What do you think, Zach?
I think he wants him to trade back into the second round, to get a guy that might be coming off the board that they want.
Right.
That's what he's saying. And you know what? I would be for that. Like I said, they have the capital this year to make a move. The only thing is I'm not going to trade just for the sake of trading. If they love a guy and they think he's going to be taken, go up and get him like they did with Drew Lock last year. But don't just give up picks for the sake of giving up picks. Elway values him too much to be willy-nilly. Yeah,
there was an analytical piece that Thomas Hall published over right as the weekend started this past weekend on basically and on the draft and the best approach in terms of trading picks or stockpiling picks. And no surprise, it might seem simple, but no surprise, the more picks you make, the greater your odds increase of hitting on players because it's a numbers game. And you can't call the draft necessarily a crapshoot because that's pure luck. You can hedge and increase your odds of success by doing the right work in the scouting game, getting to know these guys, not only as football players, but as young men. And, you can see that in the way it turned for the Broncos from the 2016 and 2017 classes to the 2018 and 2019 draft classes, the way they changed their focus. You can alter the overall outcome, but it is still very much, you can't control everything, and chance does get involved. The more picks you have, the greater you have the chance you have of hitting on those picks. The Broncos currently have 5 selections in the top 100, including, as Josh says here, 3 third-round picks, 1 in the second, 1 in the first. So I wouldn't be surprised, though, sitting there with 3, Zach, if they do package and move up and do something early in the second round or late in the second round.
Well, the good thing is, too, it's a very deep class in certain areas, Chad, especially wide receiver, so they don't necessarily have to move up. But I'm with you. I think this is the year where Elway gets aggressive. He's feeling his oats with having a franchise quarterback, and I think he'll do what he can to help out Drew Lock, whether that's a receiver or protection. I can for sure see him move back up into the second round.
Our other Super Chat superstar named Terry jumps in up in Canada.
Thank you, Terry.
A good reminder, as always, that Broncos country is not a geographical location. It is a state of being. $5 donation. Thanks, Terry. Hey, guys, who popped for you at the Senior Bowl? I'll tell you who popped for me. Well, this one should be no surprise. Javon Kinlaw was, he went into that week, Senior Bowl week, as a first-round caliber prospect, but he cemented himself as one of the elite defensive prospects. Odds are, going into the Senior Bowl, you probably felt pretty good that there's a chance he'd be there for the Broncos at 15. Now I'll be stunned, and you never know because of quarterbacks and left tackles, but I'll be stunned if he makes it out of the top 10. Kinlaw popped. Lloyd Cushenberry, the center from LSU, was really, really good. The wide receiver, there was a few wide receivers who popped, but especially Denzel Mims from Baylor. There were a few guys that really improved their stock, and I know our senior draft analyst at Mile High Huddle, Eric Trickle, who you guys all know, he was a little brokenhearted over some of them because he was hoping that they'd kind of remain under the radar secrets. But still, you got to be happy for these guys who were able to improve their draft stock heading into what's next for them is the combine.
Kinlaw has a great backstory, too. He's such a great prospect to follow throughout the draft process. But for me, Justin Herbert, the MVP of that game, he had a pretty good performance, and he was the practice player of the week. He's not coming to Denver, obviously, but I think he had a good showing for himself in the Senior Bowl, Chad.
Ronnie, we're going to have some ball caps up on the merch store here soon, in the very, very near future, within the next few days. We have a guy working on designs and logos right now, transferred over to apparel, shirts, hats, beanies, but hats specifically, they're coming, and you can go to the merch store, huddle-up-myshopify.com. I can post the link later in the comment stream, but yeah, that's coming down the pike, my friend. Sleek Tro on YouTube. Daniel Jeremiah in his mock draft said that we should draft Jerry Jeudy. Do you think so? I think so. Zach, your thoughts?
I think so as well. I mean, he's arguably the top receiver in this draft, and the Broncos need a complimentary receiver opposite Courtland Sutton. I would not move up for him because it's such a deep draft class, Chad. You can actually argue that someone like Henry Ruggs would fit the Broncos better. I wouldn't be disappointed, though, if they end up with Jerry Jeudy. They need him. He's one of the best players in the class, and it just would work out pretty well.
Stu, you don't have to worry about it, dude. We're going to send you one. I've got one here in my office right now with your name on it. So
we got you, Stu.
Well, I'll get that sent out to you here very, very soon, bro. All right, guys, let's grab and on the Jerry Jeudy topic real quick. Sorry, I got derailed for a second there, distracted. I'm not opposed to Jerry Jeudy. He's a great player. He's a great young prospect, very exciting young wide receiver that I think would complement Courtland Sutton quite well. But again, this is why would you go after Jerry Jeudy? Now, just think about it this way. I know it's the skill position and it's the speed and it's the playmaking ability that you covet, and he's playing at a power school in Alabama, and all that is attractive. But why would you spend a first-round pick on Jerry Jeudy or even Henry Ruggs or even Chenault, out of Colorado, when you could get a similar impact type of player in a Denzel Mims, even in the third round, with one of those third-round picks possibly? Now, maybe he's already played himself out of closer to the top 60, but still, this is such a deep wide receiver class. If you could come out of this particular draft with not only a receiver that fits a lot, checks a lot of those same boxes as a Jeudy or a Ruggs or a Chenault, and still get like a left tackle prospect in the first round or a cornerback starting caliber corner in the first round, and you still get that wide receiver. That's why I'm saying I'm not locked into wide receiver in the first round like all the mocks are. And, Benjamin Albright, he's as plugged in as anybody to Dove Valley and their machinations during the offseason. And he's saying you basically book it. It's going to be a speed demon wide receiver at pick 15 for the Broncos. Probably going to be Zach. I'm just saying that with how deep this class is, I would wait and see how this board's going to fall. See if you can get a blue chipper, because you can probably get that guy of a similar skill set and ability in round 2, round 3, round 4.
Yeah, my first preference is to take a receiver if one's on the board at 15, but I'm kind of coming around to taking someone like Kinlaw and then using the second round pick on maybe someone like Jalen Rieger or another receiver that you mentioned, Chad. It's a very, very deep class. They can come away with 2 major needs in the first 2 rounds, but I believe, and I hold firm to this, among their first couple picks, one of them has to be a premier wide receiver. They cannot skimp on this. This is Drew Lock's future. It's nothing to play around with. They have to get him that guy.
Let's grab Christian here on YouTube. I love the content you guys always provide.
Appreciate it.
Which of our free agent corners do you think will re-sign, and what would your depth chart look like at that position? Well, there's only one free agent corner, unless I'm mistaken. It's Chris Harris Jr., right? Because you've got Bryce Callahan under contract. Well, Devontae Bosby technically is going to be, I believe, an ERFA, an exclusive rights, or maybe he's restricted. One of the two. Either way, the Broncos have him locked down. He's coming back. So that's not even a question. He's not going to be contending. They're not going to have to compete in the open market unless someone comes in and wants to give sign him to an offer sheet and give the Broncos a second round pick for the privilege, which isn't going to happen. I mean, he appeared in 2 games last year as a Bronco after, leading the AAF in interceptions. So that's not going to happen. But to get back to your question, Christian, about how the depth chart looks, let's just assume for a second, Zach, that Chris Harris Jr. is gone. All right. He ends up signing elsewhere. Considering the draft, considering free agency, give us an idea of how you think the corner depth chart would look next year.
Bosby, to me, has to be penciled in at probably the 3rd cornerback on the depth chart without Chris Harris Jr. Then you have Bryce Callahan coming back, and I assume he'll be healthy next year. So it's like they're getting a new player, Chad. It's like they're signing him this offseason. So brand new guy to the system. Then we'll use the draft or trade for a corner. I believe that's the one position they're going to go on defense in free agency. Sign someone like Ronald Darby. There's a lot of other corners out there they can just get as a veteran filler type of guy and then use the draft to supplement that. But I give it like a 35-40% chance that Chris Harris Jr. comes back. I'm not very hopeful on the Broncos bringing him back. I think he wants too much money, and he doesn't. To me, he's not worth it. He fell off last year. Broncos can go in a different direction, a younger and cheaper direction.
I guess you could classify Will Parks as a corner because he played so much nickel corner for the team down the stretch, especially after Kareem Jackson was suspended. But yeah, I think you're going to see Bryce Callahan as cornerback 1 next year. This is assuming Chris Harris Jr. is gone, which I think both of us were on the same page. 70% chance he's playing elsewhere next year. Yeah. So Bryce Callahan, even if they bring someone in from free agency or draft one in the first 2 rounds, Bryce Callahan projects as your number 1 corner, which is kind of scary. A little. I mean, it's exciting. Like Zach said, it's like getting a new signee because we didn't see him at all last year, but he's a career nickel guy. And for him to be your number 1 corner, it's a little bit scary, right? Because you don't really know how he can hang for a full season on the outside. I mean, look what happened to Chris Harris this last year when he was asked to do that. He was burned left and right. Not left and right. That's hyperbole, but you get my point. I think it'll be still in order of depth chart, Callahan, and either a first or second round corner or a free agent pickup or a trade like Darius Slay. Darius Slay in Detroit is someone that I think the Broncos should at least pick up the phone and see what it would take to get him to Denver. And then followed by Devontae Bosby, probably the other Harris, Devontae Harris, then Isaac Yiadom, and anyone else they might add between now and then. Our friend Larry, Broncos fan number 24 on YouTube, jumps in, $10 donation.
Thank you, Larry.
Appreciate you, bro. It's good to see you. He says, recently, ruptured my Achilles. Oh, dude.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, that sucks. I have a new profound respect for Emmanuel Sanders, LOL. But you guys make the recovery process so much easier. Appreciate the content week in and week out. We appreciate
better,
you.
Get better soon, man.
Yeah, that's brutal, dude.
I've heard it's rough. Rough injury to come back from.
I have a cousin who, a few years younger than I, so mid-30s, something like that. And he was just playing a little game of pickup basketball in a church and ruptured his Achilles. And he said it just disappeared. Like he felt a pop and he looked, and his Achilles had just like sucked up into his calf, and he was like, "What?" Most painful, and it took him like 6 months to recover. So, Larry, Godspeed on that recovery, brother. That's brutal. Terry jumps back in, $10 donation. A couple more guys, and we got to get out of here. Terry, he says, "Is this the year Elway, the quarterback, puts more weight on fixing our offensive line problems?" Well, I think you're going to see the Broncos continue to add to that, but they have some plates they're spinning in the air right now. They have to decide what to do with Connor McGovern. Push comes to shove, if he indeed, as I'm hearing, wants to push for, $10 million or more, like a contract commensurate with what Cody Whitehair got in Chicago, the Broncos are probably going to kiss him goodbye. So now you have another hole open up on the offensive line. Ronald Leary, really good chance, unless he's willing to renegotiate his deal. He's gone. So let's just say you're staring at an offseason where you need to get a new center and a new right guard. So I think this is a draft where you can get both, but you're probably going to have to be willing to invest a premium round pick. By that, I mean a pick in round 1, 2, or 3. And that's why I'm saying, you guys, hold off on the wide receivers. You can get really good players in this class without having to dip into the first or even second round well. So is this the year he puts more weight on fixing our O-line problems? We'll see. It also, you have to wonder how much he's going to continue to kind of lean on the coaching expertise, Zach, of Mike Munchak.
You can argue certainly that Elway picked the wrong lineman in recent years, but you can't really fault him for trying. Every single offseason, he's either signed one, traded for one, or drafted one. You're talking about Stevenson, Menelik Watson, Garrett Bowles, Jared Valdir, Juwan James. He's tried every offseason to find those franchise guys that just haven't really panned out. So I don't fault Elway for trying. I fault him for looking in the wrong directions with injury-prone players. This is the offseason, though, where I believe he invests in the draft with the offensive line, taking multiple linemen and starting to develop them behind the starters they have already. His biggest fault to me was the one inactive move he didn't make, which is re-signing Matt Paradis. He should have done that. He should have opened up the checkbook. He was a great player for the team. He deserved the contract. And now they're watching their center and McGovern hit the open market. So they're right back in square one. So I believe he's done well in trying, but this is the year, I believe, where he doesn't lean on veterans. He leans on building through the draft to find those linemen.
Mark Langley jumps in, $5 donation again. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Mark.
You are the man, bro. He says, Brandon McMahon better watch out for his job. Hot Rod, the kicker from Georgia Bulldogs, is very good. Rodrigo Blankenship, hashtag no dogs, hashtag Orange Crush. By the way, just a quick aside. Maybe I'll pull it up, but the MHH guys give me a hard time, and they say that he's my doppelganger, Rodrigo Blankenship. Don't ask me. This is coming from them, okay? There is an outside chance that in my spare time, I have spent the last 4 years kicking for the Georgia Bulldogs. Maybe it's a conspiracy theory. Anyway, check that out. And thanks, by the way, Mark. Yeah, I mean, he's a really good young kicker, and I think he's one of the few in this class that has a future kicking in the league.
I don't really like the fact of McMahon being the one that gets to choose the next kicker or having anything to do with that process, but they might bring in some competition, but they're contractually tied to Brandon McManus, but I will definitely be using that nickname when he misses some field goals next season.
Brian jumps in, $2 donation.
Thank you,
on
Brian.
Super Chat. Appreciate you, Brian. Damien with a $10 donation.
Thank you, Damien.
Thank you, Damien. I don't see any good wide receivers. Who did I miss? Now, what are you talking about specifically? I don't see any good wide receivers. You're talking about the draft class? You're talking about the Senior Bowl? Maybe elucidate a little bit further in the comment stream, and we can answer your question. And thank you again, Damien, for your support.
Yes.
We appreciate you, bro. I'll keep an eye out for that. We'll answer Christian's question and keep an eye out for Damien to elaborate. Is Draymond Jones from Christian on YouTube a starter next season, likely or unlikely, Zach?
Interesting. It depends on what they do. I think they'll bring back one of either Derek Wolfe or Shelby Harris, but he'll be a prominent contributor. He'll start, or not start, but he'll appear in every game. He'll have a significant role on the defense, but starter, I'm not there yet. I think he needs another year, and there's always DeMarcus Walker taking his reps also. So not a starter, but definitely a key contributor on the defense next year.
I disagree in that I think he showed enough down the stretch. When you draft a defensive lineman in the third round, even though the team knew out of the gates he was going to take time to come around as a run defender. He was basically just a pure interior pass rusher as a rookie, and probably first year or second year as well. But I do think when you draft someone that high on the D-line, your ultimate goal is for him to eventually become a starter somewhere along that 4-year rookie contract. So will he be? Depends on how many of these guys end up actually departing in free agency. As you were saying, like Derek Wolfe, if he comes back, well, there's one starting job locked down. DeMarcus Walker's going to be there. They'll have to battle for that other 5 tech, or 3 tech, depending on how you want to classify Fangio's defense. That other defensive end slot / inside tackle slot. But I wouldn't be surprised. If I had to bet on it today, I would say yes, he's probably going to be a starter in 2020. Now let's see if our boy came back here. I'm not seeing him saying anything about his question, Damien. I mean, again, dude, I don't know what you're talking about on if you're talking about the draft class, the free agent class, the Senior Bowl. But guys, that's got to do it for today's episode of the Huddle Up podcast. We're running a little bit long, but thanks to each and every one of you for spending time with us and contributing to the conversation and making this podcast that much more compelling and fun for Zach and I. And, of course, a mile-high salute, big props to our Super Chat superstars. You guys never cease to amaze us day in, day out. We love you guys so much. Make sure you are following the show, you guys, on Twitter @HuddleUpPod. Simply the best way for you to keep your finger on the pulse of what's happening with the show in real time. And then, of course, make sure you find my partner, Zack Kelberman, on Twitter @KelbermanNFL. You can find myself @Chad and Jensen. And head on over. Don't forget, Apple Podcasts. Leave a creative review when you get some time. It's not an emergency, but when you get some time, great way to help support the show. And then in the meantime, guys, we're off tomorrow. Of course, the Huddle Up podcast. But Building the Broncos, Nick and Carl, for the first time, they're going to take their podcast live to you guys at 6 p.m. Mountain Time, just like we normally go, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 Central. So look forward to that. Be ready to rock and roll with your draft questions because those guys are that's their baby, that's their bread and butter. So in the meantime, Zach and I will be back on Wednesday evening, usual time, 6 p.m. Mountain, 8 p.m. Eastern. And Zach, have a great start to your week, bro.
You too, Chad, and everyone else.
All right, guys. For Zack Kelberman, I'm Chad Jensen. We will talk to you again Wednesday night.